Get that mutt out of here, old man. This ain't no dog park. The taxi driver's voice sliced through the humid morning air, sharp as a switchblade. His words, dripping with disdain, echoed off the cracked asphalt of the Brooklyn street. The yellow cab idled, its engine growling like an impatient beast, while the driver leaned out the window, glaring at 74-year-old veteran Samuel Sam Carter. Sam stood frozen, his weathered hand gripping the leash of his service dog, Max, a golden retriever whose calm brown eyes seemed to absorb the cruelty of the moment. The air smelled of exhaust and yesterday's rain, and the distant wail of a siren underscored the tension. Passers-by shuffled along, some casting curious glances, others pretending not to notice. Sam's faded army cap, embroidered with a Vietnam service ribbon, sat slightly askew on his graying head, a quiet testament to his past that the driver clearly didn't care to see. Sam's chest tightened, not from his heart condition but from the familiar sting of disrespect. He'd faced enemy fire in jungles half a world away, carried wounded brothers through chaos, and earned scars that still ached on rainy days. Yet here on a street he'd called home for decades, he was reduced to old man and his loyal companion to mutt. Max, trained to sense Sam's distress, pressed his warm flank against Sam's leg, grounding him. Sam's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed steady. "This is my service dog, sir. I need him to get to my VA appointment." "It's in 7 minutes." The driver scoffed, his sneer revealing a gold-capped tooth. "I don't care what that dog is. No fur in my cab. Walk or find another ride." The door slammed shut, and the cab peeled away, leaving a cloud of fumes and a hollow ache in Sam's gut. Just moments before, Sam had been a beacon of kindness. He'd stopped to help a young mother struggling with a stroller on the subway steps, his arthritis be damned. He'd smiled, tipped his cap, and said, "Let me give you a hand, ma'am." Her grateful nod had warmed him, a reminder that he still had purpose. Max had sat patiently, tail wagging, as Sam lifted the stroller with care. That small act of goodness had carried him to the curb, hopeful for a quick ride to the VA hospital. Now that hope lay crushed under the weight of the driver's cruelty. Sam's hand trembled as he pulled out his phone, its cracked screen a mirror of his fractured pride. He glanced at his watch. 6 minutes left. The VA was a 20-minute walk, too far for his unsteady legs. Missing this appointment meant delaying critical heart meds, and Sam knew all too well how fast things could spiral. Around him the city pulsed with indifference. A street vendor shouted about hot pretzels, and a delivery bike whizzed by, nearly clipping Max. A young woman in earbuds paused, her eyes flickering with pity before she hurried on. Sam's mind raced. Should he beg another driver? Risk a fall trying to walk? The weight of his dog tags tucked under his shirt pressed against his chest, a symbol of battles fought and won. He clutched them briefly, drawing strength from their cold metal. "We'll figure this out, Max," he muttered, though doubt gnawed at him. His eyes scanned the street, searching for a solution, when a new sound cut through the urban din, the low hum of a police cruiser rolling to a stop nearby. A young officer stepped out, his badge glinting in the sun, his expression unreadable. Sam's stomach lurched. Was this help or more trouble? The officer's boots hit the pavement with purpose, and Sam braced himself, unsure what to expect. The crowd thickened slightly, a few people murmuring, one pulling out a phone to record. Sam's heart pounded, but he stood tall, Max at his side, refusing to let the world see him shrink. The officer's gaze locked onto Sam's cap, then Max's vest, and something shifted in his posture. But what came next would test Sam's resolve in ways he couldn't yet fathom. "We've only just begun this story, but trust me, it's about to get even more gripping." Stick around to see how Sam faces an even steeper challenge as the stakes climb higher. The Brooklyn street pulsed with the chaotic rhythm of mid-morning life, but for Samuel Carter, the world narrowed to the young police officer striding toward him. The officer's badge caught the sunlight, a sharp glint that mirrored the edge in his voice. "Sir, you need to move along," he said, his tone clipped, his eyes darting between Sam's weathered army cap and Max's service vest. "You're blocking the sidewalk." Sam's grip tightened on Max's leash, the leather biting into his palm. The air smelled of burnt coffee from a nearby cart and the faint tang of asphalt baking under the sun. A small crowd had gathered, shoppers, delivery workers, a kid with a skateboard. Whispering, pointing, some filming with their phones. Sam felt the weight of their stares, each one a needle pricking his pride. He'd survived ambushes in Vietnam, carried the weight of fallen comrades, yet here he stood, a 74-year-old veteran, being told to move along like a vagrant. "I'm trying to get to the VA hospital," Sam said, his voice low but firm, the kind of steady that came from years of facing down fear. "My appointment's in 5 minutes. That cab driver refused my service dog." He gestured toward Max, whose golden fur gleamed under the morning light, his vest clearly marked service animal. The officer, barely older than Sam's grandson, raised an eyebrow, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Dogs aren't allowed in cabs unless the driver agrees. You should have planned better." The words landed like a slap and Sam's chest tightened. Not from his heart condition, but from the casual dismissal of his need, his service, his existence. A woman in the crowd gasped softly, muttering, "That's not right." But no one stepped forward. Sam's fingers brushed the dog tags beneath his shirt, their familiar weight anchoring him. He wouldn't beg, not after all he'd endured. The officer's radio crackled, spitting out codes and static, and he turned slightly, listening. Sam seized the moment to scan the street again, desperation creeping in. His legs ached, his knees protesting every step he hadn't yet taken. Missing this appointment wasn't just about meds. It was about dignity, about proving he could still navigate a world that seemed to have forgotten him. He noticed a second cab slowing nearby, its driver eyeing the scene. Sam raised a hand, hopeful, but the driver shook his head and sped off. The rejection stung worse than the first, a reminder of how invisible he'd become. Max nudged his leg, sensing the rising tension, and Sam knelt briefly, whispering, "We're not done yet, boy." The act of kneeling sent a jolt of pain through his joints, but it also stirred a memory. Crouching in a foxhole, clutching a letter from his late wife, promising he'd come home. That promise had kept him alive then. He'd keep it now. The officer turned back, his expression hardening. "Look, I don't have time for this. Walk or find another way, but you can't stay here." His voice carried the impatience of bureaucracy, the kind that saw Sam as a problem, not a person. A man in a business suit muttered, "Just let him go, officer." But the words were half-hearted, swallowed by the crowd's murmur. Sam's mind raced. He could try walking, risk collapsing halfway, or call his daughter, who was working across town and couldn't possibly get here in time. The unfairness of it burned. First the driver, now this officer, both dismissing him as if his years of service, his sacrifices meant nothing. He straightened, his eyes locking with the officer's. "I served this country," he said, his voice carrying a quiet fire. "I deserve better than being pushed aside." The officer's jaw twitched, but before he could respond, a new sound cut through the air, a sharp honk from a sleek black SUV pulling up to the curb. The crowd parted, phones still raised, as a woman in a crisp blazer stepped out. Her silver hair was pulled back, and her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, took in the scene. A badge on her lapel read City Council. Sam's heart skipped, not from hope but from uncertainty. Was this another hurdle, or the break he needed? The woman's gaze landed on Sam's cap, then Max, and her lips pressed into a thin line. She strode forward, her heels clicking like a metronome, and the officer stiffened, clearly recognizing her. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a ripple of anticipation spreading. Someone whispered, "That's Councilwoman Harris." Sam stood his ground, Max at his side, as the air grew thick with the promise of confrontation. "We're on the edge of something big. What happens next will flip everything you've seen so far. Don't miss how Sam's fight for respect takes a turn you won't see coming." The Brooklyn street hummed with tension as Councilwoman Harris's heels clicked closer, each step a drumbeat of authority slicing through the morning chaos. Samuel Carter stood rooted to the sidewalk, his weathered hand gripping Max's leash, the golden retriever's steady presence a lifeline against the storm of indignity. The air carried the sharp scent of diesel and the faint sweetness of a nearby bakery, but Sam's focus was on the councilwoman's piercing gaze, now locked on the young officer who'd dismissed him moments ago. The crowd, delivery workers, shoppers, a teenager with a skateboard, pressed closer, their phones raised like torches, capturing every second. A woman clutching a grocery bag whispered, "This is gonna be good," her voice tinged with hope. Sam's heart pounded, his dog tags pressing against his chest, a cold reminder of battles fought and a promise to himself. He wouldn't back down, not today. Councilwoman Harris stopped a few feet away, her silver hair catching the sunlight, her badge gleaming like a challenge. "Officer," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel, "mind explaining why a veteran and his service dog are being treated like they don't belong on this street?" The officer's face flushed, his hand dropping from his belt as he stammered, "Ma'am, I was just—" Sidewalks crowded and he wouldn't move. Sam's jaw tightened. Wouldn't move? He'd been stranded, dismissed. First by a cab driver who sneered at Max, then by this officer who saw him as a nuisance. The crowd murmured, a low rumble of discontent, and a man in a construction vest called out, "Let the old man through! He's earned it!" The words hit Sam like a warm breeze, stirring something deep, a flicker of pride he hadn't felt in years. Harris's eyes flicked to Sam's faded army cap, then to Max's vest, and her expression softened, but only slightly. "This man served our country," she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "And you're telling him to move along because a cab driver broke the law." She turned to Sam, her voice gentler now. "Mr. Carter, is it? I saw you helping that young mother with the stroller earlier. That's who you are, a man who helps. So why are you standing here fighting for a ride to the VA?" Sam swallowed, his throat dry. "Driver refused my service dog, ma'am. Said no fur in his cab. I've got a heart appointment in—" He glanced at his watch, the cracked face showing 2 minutes left. Well, now! His voice cracked, not from weakness but from the weight of being unseen, unheard after decades of service. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a chorus of outrage. A young woman with a baby on her hip shouted, "That's illegal! Service dogs are protected." Another voice, gruff and older, added, "Shame on that driver!" Sam felt the tide shifting, the collective anger wrapping around him like a shield. Harris raised a hand, silencing the crowd, and turned back to the officer. "You know the law, don't you? The Americans with Disabilities Act. Or do I need to call your sergeant?" The officer's face reddened further, and he muttered, "No, ma'am." Harris didn't wait for more. She pulled out her phone, dialed, and spoke briskly. "Yes, I need a unit to escort a veteran to the VA hospital. Now." Sam's breath caught.
Escort?
He hadn't expected this, not after the morning's humiliations. Moments later, another cruiser pulled up, its lights flashing but silent. A second officer, older with gray at his temples, stepped out and approached Sam directly. "Mr. Carter, I'm Officer Daniels. I'll drive you to your appointment. Max is welcome, too." His voice was steady, respectful, and when he extended his hand, Sam shook it, feeling the weight of his dog tags shift as he did. The crowd erupted in cheers, a few clapping, one man whistling sharply. The teenager with the skateboard yelled, "That's right!" and Sam felt a lump rise in his throat. He knelt to stroke Max's fur, whispering, "We made it, boy." The memory of a long-ago letter from his wife surfaced, her words urging him to keep fighting, to come home. He'd kept that promise then, and today he'd kept another. As Sam climbed into the cruiser, Max settling at his feet, Councilwoman Harris stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry this happened, Mr. Carter," she said, her voice low but firm. "But you've got a community behind you now." She turned to the crowd, raising her voice. "This veteran deserves better, and we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again." She pulled a small sticker from her pocket, a city seal, and placed it on the cruiser's window, a quiet symbol of accountability. The crowd roared again, and Sam, for the first time that day, felt seen. As the cruiser pulled away, he glanced back, seeing the first officer standing alone, head bowed, while the crowd's cheers echoed in his ears. The VA hospital was just minutes away, but the real victory was already his, dignity reclaimed, not just for him, but for every veteran who'd ever been pushed aside.